All right, here in this part, what we're going to do is we're going to talk about how we're going to build these phylogenies and kind of the just general mechanism using a really kind of rough example of how of a bunch of different organisms, how we're going to place them into a phylogeny. Okay, so what we have to talk about are shared primitive characters and shared derived characters. And what shared derived characters are these new kind of evolutionary novelties that have arisen in a particular clade, whereas a shared ancestral character is something that's older and kind of predates that entire clade. So an example would be, for instance, of a shared derived character would be hair, and this is shared by all mammals, but it's not found in non-mammalian vertebrates. Okay. And this shared ancestral character, again, this is something that's beyond the taxon that we're trying to define. So if we look at the backbone, this is a homologous structure that kind of predates the branching of the mammals from other vertebrate clades. Okay, so we can look at this backbone as either a shared derived character at a deeper branch within vertebrates, and then we can look at, for instance, hair as to being this we can look at the backbone as a shared ancestral character that predates mammals, but we can look at hair as shared derived character as we kind of build our clade up. And what it says here is the backbone can qualify as a shared derived character at a deeper branch point that distinguishes vertebrates from other animals. Okay, so there's a variety of ways that we got to look at this, but the key is ancestral means it's older and it predates the things that we're talking about, and derived is kind of an evolutionary novelty. Okay, so when we're inferring these phylogenies, it becomes kind of difficult when we have to sort through all of the different homologies and different types of things that determine whether we have shared ancestral or shared derived types of characteristics. Okay, among vertebrates, this backbone is a shared primitive character or a shared ancestral type of a character because it is present in all ancestors, or it is present in the ancestor to all vertebrates. Okay, so if we're looking at different types of eukaryotic cells, it's a shared derived character because it's an evolutionary novelty in eukaryotes, but it's a shared primitive character when you're looking at it in terms of these vertebrates. All right, so before we start making these different types of comparisons, what we have to do is we have to look at an in-group and an out-group. In this in-group are all of the things that we're kind of looking at and how they all possess a particular characteristic that's different than the one found within that out-group. All right, so the in-group, these are the species that we're studying, and the out-group is the species that's closely related in some way to the in-group, but different enough that it allows us to make these comparisons so that we can start to build the clade. So if we look at our example here, we've got a lancet, a lamprey, a tuna fish, a salamander, a turtle, and a leopard. And we're going to just take those, and there's a lot of differences between them, but just for the purposes of building the clade that we're talking about, we're going to just discuss these types of things here. And if we look at the outgroup, this is the basis of comparison so that we can look at our species and say, all right, all of the species that we're looking at here have something in common with each other that the outgroup does not have in common. But that outgroup is chosen because those members of the in-group at some point may possess something that the outgroup has. So for instance, if we look at this outgroup, it's less closely related than any of the in-group members are to one another based on the evidence that we have. So this lancet is a good example of an outgroup because it's a member of the phylum Chordata, which all of the others are as well. Okay, the lancet itself, however, even though it belongs to the phylum Chordata, it has a notochord during its development and then on through its life. It doesn't have any backbone. So the lamprey, the tuna fish, salamander, turtle, and leopard all have a backbone, and the lancet does not have that. So now we have this in-group and out-group comparison. And what we're going to do is we're going to look at and base our assumptions are that all of these homologies are primitive characters that predate the divergence of these groups. Okay, and the notochord is the example in our example here, because lancets, as we said, have notochords for their entire life, and the vertebrates that we're talking about, the lamprey, tuna, salamander, turtle, and leopards, are all vertebrates, but they have a notochord during embryonic development. So somewhere along the way, they have some relatedness to one another, but that lancet is different enough that we're going to consider it the outgroup. So if we look at these in-group species now, we have a series of shared primitive and shared derived characters. And by using the outgroup comparison, we can compare those organisms with those particular characteristics to the ones that kind of diverge along the way along all of these branch points. Okay, and we're not showing necessarily any age, we're just showing where this divergence could have occurred and really its relative kind of position in time. So all vertebrates in the in-group, of course, as we said, have a backbone, and that backbone is the shared primitive character that's present in an ancestral vertebrate but not in that outgroup. Okay, so if we go back to the lancet and we look at it, it's an outgroup again because it doesn't have a backbone. So if we look at the idea now of a hinged jaw, these are present in lampreys, but they're not present in any other member of the in-group. Okay, so I said they're present in lampreys. They're absent in lampreys. So we'll look at the picture here. What this lamprey is basically it's got a mouth that looks like this, and it's got a bunch of teeth on it. And what it does is it grabs onto the sides of fish, kind of, twists its way and, on. It doesn't have any hinged jaws, but it kind of twists its way on, and it basically sucks the insides out of the fish. So they're parasitic in that they attach on and then they don't let go, and then that's really how they feed and make their life. But if we look at the lancet here, the lancet, of course, doesn't have the backbone, doesn't have the vertebral column. So the vertebral column here is the shared derived character that distinguishes the lamprey from the lancet in this example. Okay. Now that vertebral column, even though it's the shared derived character, it becomes the shared primitive character when we look at the tuna fish and the lamprey, because both of these have backbones. So that's the shared primitive character, and the shared derived character now is the hinged jaws, because the tuna fish has the hinged jaw, whereas the lamprey does not. Okay, but now that hinged jaw was a shared derived character. Now it's becoming the shared primitive character when we look at walking legs. These 4 walking legs in the salamander here, okay, becomes the shared derived character. The shared primitive character is the hinged jaw because they both have hinged jaws. Okay. Now the turtle and the salamander both have 4 walking legs, so that what was once the shared derived character is now the shared primitive character, and the distinguisher between the turtle and the salamander is an amniotic egg. So they both have 4 legs, but only the turtle lays amniotic eggs, the salamander does not. But now this shared derived character here of this amniotic egg actually becomes the shared primitive character when we look at leopards and turtles, because hair now is the shared derived character. So what was once an ancestral character becomes the derived character, and so on and so forth. So it's all in how you're looking at these types of things. But that's how we're going about building these particular clades. And again, as always, if you have questions, make sure you write them down, and we'll talk about them in class. Okay? We'll see you soon.